Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'm looking at one of the Art Masters, one of the books in the Art Masters series from Self-Made Hero. I picked this up at Second and Charles. I'm a real big fan of the artist Thomas Campi. I don't know if any of his other stuff has been translated. I should say I'm a real big recent fan, having discovered him on Instagram. When I grabbed this book, I wasn't even paying attention to who did it. I just thought it looked nice. When I got home, I was like, oh, that's that guy. I've been really following his work on Instagram lately. So definitely I'm going to be looking for more work by Thomas Campi. I will be checking out the rest of this series. Based on the images in the back, I think this is probably the one I'm going to like the most, but it's really well done homage to Rene Magritte. So this is Magritte. This is not a biography, obviously playing on Magritte's famous "Ce n'est pas une pipe." Please excuse my French, but this is not a pipe. And the book deals with that formal trickery that like Magritte always played with, of like symbol and image and language undermining themselves. It's definitely not a biography. It's like a surrealist tale, which is totally appropriate, where this character here has bought a bowler hat, and it turns out, and getting ready to go like be an adult for the first time and go to his new job, and gets basically possessed by the hat, which turns out to be Magritte's hat that he bought at a used store, bought it on consignment or something. And the hat starts to send him on a journey to find out who was Rene Magritte. And Magritte, being the Dadaist, the kind of pre-postmodernist that the Dadaists were, wants to defy definition and wants to defy being able to easily be summed up in a biography, so fights him. And the only real sense you get of who Magritte was is in his evasions, which, you know, works for a Dadaist, surrealist, kind of proto-postmodernist. That makes sense. The art in it, you can tell, are these beautiful painted images. It mostly looks like watercolor, but I think some of it is in oil. It doesn't totally look like Magritte, but it looks close enough that it's a really great, it's the perfect style for it. And there's a lot of this being a European first book, I assume. There's more formal play than I'm used to from European books. I'm used to European books having the more fine art looking art, but I'm used to American books playing more with the formal aspects of comics. Really nice to have those two things come together. You're doing a book on Magritte, you kind of have to do that. So I'm glad they did that. Just some of them that I really liked, point those out here. This was interesting to me. I don't know what exactly it's showing, but like he shifts into another reality or something. So there's a large frame that's mapped over these other 5 frames that's just demarcated by the color getting darker. Don't know exactly what that was about. I think it's showing like this other compressed reality in there. Like this whole choo-choo train thing is, well, I don't know. Here it leaves. So I'm not exactly sure what that decision was about, but visually I like it. It's interesting, I think about it. And then also, this character that's driving the train is talking, and the main character says, "The font's too small. I can't hear you." So that's really fun, acknowledging that it's the font. It's not like, hey, you're too quiet. It's the lettering's too small, and we're reading the book. I also have to wonder, since this was made after Understanding Comics, Scott McCloud famously starts his discussion about language and symbols with Magritte's "Ce n'est pas une pipe," and there's the part in there that has always stuck with me where Scott McCloud says, "Do you hear what I'm saying?" And he says, "No, you don't." Like, and he further reemphasizes the point of like, this is just letters on paper. It's just ink on paper. So I wonder. I have to imagine that the writer and artist, being comic makers themselves, are familiar with that and know they're making a comic book about Magritte, and are tying back into that. If not, if I'm just reading into that, it's still a fun trick, but I like that connection outside of the book, which seems a very postmodern thing. Like, you're going to constantly be connecting to intertextual things. You're not just going to be contained to the interpretation of the text within itself, but what exists around it. What context does it exist in? So I think that's really smart. This is another sequence I really like here. The character follows along here, and then you follow the path up. And there's no problem in reading that, especially because of the color, and then the motion makes it really clear. This is something, again, that I'm used to seeing in American comics where the characters exit the gutters. They climb around on the panels like architecture. It's not a new trick. I'm just really not used to seeing it in a European-looking book. And again, I wish I saw more of that in the European stuff. I think there's starting to be more of it, but those kind of formal tricks combined with the more fine art stuff, I feel is where comics really push themselves to being, not that they're not legitimate, but I mean, they just really become undeniable at that point as great works of art. And then that whole sequence continues to be clever on the next page, where the panels from the previous page start to peel back and become dimensional, and they go away and they expose themselves. And there's also a trick here where even though the motion has flowed this way, this character kind of goes right into this character. So he hits a wall, like a wall in his understanding. And it takes the layers being peeled back to show, like, potentially these moments here have some link, and it's up to the viewer to go make that link between these images and go back and read what's happening here and see, maybe in a psychoanalytic fashion, what's going on here that showed up here. Me looking at them, I don't know. I don't quite get the link, but I like that it asks me to do that, and it leaves it open to interpretation, symbolic interpretation. That's a very surrealist thing to do, and it's a very postmodernist thing to do, that it's asking me for my interpretation. It's not being so clear about what the artist is saying. And throughout the story, with Magritte being evasive of this character's interpretation, this works as well. Like, whatever you interpret out of closing that sequence conceptually shows more about your psychology probably than about Magritte's. So right in line with what someone that, with the commitments that Magritte would want to be doing. Here's another one I found bizarre, because Thomas Campi can obviously paint and does paint. There's all of a sudden some collage elements of a photograph, so mixing up the reality even more, and then putting the fairly realistically painted image over top of the photographic image, like replacing that sense of representation. Again, something, with the Saint Pot and Peep, like Magritte is playing with, like, this is not a pipe, this is a representation. So he was constantly picking away at the idea of representation. Again, Scott McCloud uses that for his discussion about abstraction as well. So talking about this being more realistic, this being more abstract. I think there's a callback there as well. That's really interesting. The character goes through, obviously Magritte, you're dealing with surrealism. They do some psychological interpretation of Magritte, talking about his mother having died, and him seeing her with a cloth over his face. So where they can, they try to get a psychological like a Freudian interpretation of his work, but then he constantly resists that. The character of Magritte pushes back on that, as he should. Another really interesting meta moment right here. The Magritte shows up and starts painting the character out, like erasing him, painting the blue on him. And the book becomes meta. He starts becoming aware, well, you're just in my story here, buddy. Or, you're in a story. And then this woman here is reading a book that shares the cover with that. So it becomes super meta. And then you flip over here, and she's warning him, like, what does she say? She says, beware at the bottom of this page. What page? He doesn't even know. In the last panel. What are you talking about? You can't just get to know my work without any consequences, Magritte. no, not that way. And then he runs to the panel that she's been warning him about, and Magritte paints reality. And so Magritte like kicks him out of the story by painting him back into reality. So there's a fun meta moment where, you know, he's in the book, but not in the book, but still in the book. So that's the kind of play that you can get in this book, combined with beautiful art. Really smart product. If you like this and you like all the meta play in that and you haven't ordered it yet, make sure to grab The Strange Death of Alex Raymond by Dave Sim and myself. This is probably the most meta book you've ever got, where we're intentionally, very clearly talking about the overlap between fiction and reality. We're purposely mixing those things up and talking about the consequences of artists who have mixed up fiction and reality. That's what this book is all about. Sean Robinson, who did the reproduction work on the book, has made sure that mine and Dave art reproduces better than any line art reproduction you've ever seen before. It's a total head trip of a book as well. So if you like meta stories, you like play with symbol, you like kind of postmodernism, intertextual interpretations of works, these are both awesome books. Thanks for following along. Take it away, Jack.
You want to see all these books? Smash that subscribe button and the like button and the bell, and then you get them.